In this video, we will show you how to replace your fuel pump assembly on this Ford Ranger. This will be located in your fuel tank, accessed from under your vehicle. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. Safely make your way under the hood. We're going to disconnect the negative battery terminal. Use an 8mm, we'll turn this counterclockwise so we can remove this from the battery. Go ahead and give each of these areas a quick inspection and set it aside so it is separated. While we're under the hood, let's also release pressure from the fuel system. If you were to look along the driver's side of the engine, you're going to find a small cap up along the fuel rail. That's this area that goes underneath your intake. Remove the cap. You'll find a small Schrader valve. Be careful, the fuel system is under pressure. We're going to carefully cover the area and press down on the center valve. When you go to press on this, it's a good idea to cover it with something so it doesn't spray out, potentially towards your face. Just going to cover that hole with a small rag here, protect my face. Pressing on that. It's nice and wet. Dispose of that properly. Let's get the cap on here. Let's make our way back to our fuel door here. Remove your cap. Let's get that fuel cap off of there. We'll give the gasket a quick inspection and carefully hang this aside for now. Before you make your way under the vehicle, keep in mind you will have to lower the fuel tank so you can gain access to that fuel pump. You may have to safely raise the vehicle so you can make your way under. Once you're under the vehicle, along the driver's side, you're going to be looking for your fuel filler neck and fuel filler hoses. We have the large hose here, and we also have this vent tube. Each of those are held in place with a small clamp. Loosen the clamp and slide it out of the way. After that, remove the hose from the filler neck. Socket sizes for these clamps could be an 8mm or a 1/4 inch. It really just depends on the clamp itself. To separate the hoses, you could carefully use a small hose pick. While doing so, be extremely careful not to poke a hole in the hose, causing damage. Once you do remove the hoses, give them a quick squeeze. Make sure they're soft and pliable, not torn, worn, or damaged in any way. Inspect those clamps, make sure they're reusable, and set them aside. Now we'll start removing our fuel tank shield. This is held in place with 4 13mm mounting nuts. Be careful as you remove this shield, it is a little heavy. Inspect that mounting hardware, replace it as necessary. I'm going to remove this one and start it on there just a couple threads for safety. Let's hold that shield. Carefully remove the shield from the vehicle. Give it a close inspection and set it aside. At this point, we're going to carefully remove our drive shaft. We want to be careful that the vehicle does not shift on us, so make sure you chock your front wheels front and rear so your vehicle cannot move. Along the front of the drive shaft, you'll find that it does slide into the transmission. There's the probability fluid may come out of that area, so make sure you have a collection bucket. Now, as you make your way towards the rear here, you're going to find that you have 4 12mm 12-point bolts. Go ahead and carefully remove those and remove the drive shaft from your rear differential yoke. Before you remove that, it's a good idea to mark the drive shaft end here and the yoke So when you put everything back together, you put it in the same position. Let's start removing these bolts. Once we get the first one out, go ahead and give it a quick inspection and start it back in just a couple threads for safety. And the other two are just on the other side of this. Same procedure, pop them right out of there. Now we can carefully start removing that drive shaft. Hold on to the drive shaft while you remove your final bolt. You may find you have to lightly tap on the drive shaft itself to break it free. Be careful not to cause any damage. We'll use a rubber mallet. Make sure you have a collection bucket under the front of this area, just in case any fluid comes out of the transmission. There we are. Start sliding this out of here. Be very careful. Let's get this out of here. Give your drive shaft a close inspection and set it aside, being extremely careful not to cause any damage. Now the next thing we're going to do is prepare to start lowering the tank. To lower the tank, you want to be extremely careful. If you happen to have a jack of some sort that you'll be able to angle, that'll be the easiest way to do this. To remove the tank, you're going to have to remove each one of the straps. You'll find that you have two of them, one along the front of the tank and one towards the rear of the tank. Before you remove the straps, you need to make sure you secure the tank against the body of the vehicle. While holding pressure, let's remove our 13mm mounting bolt holding the forward strap in place. Inspect that mounting bolt. If it looks like it's rotted and damaged, replace it. Let's pull this down. Now as we bring this down at an angle, if you have a jack underneath here, you may find that it gets bound up. But if you were to look along the far side there, you will find that it slides up into the frame. I'll leave this paused here, make my way, do the same to the rearward strap. Start bringing this down carefully. This is not a race. Let's make sure we tilt everything as needed here. All right. Now we can push the fuel tank towards the center of the vehicle and start removing these straps. When doing so, you're going to have to carefully twist them and slide them out of the frame. Has this small hooked area here. It's common to see rust. You just want to make sure it's not rotted and weak. If it is, you want to replace that strap. This one looks fine. Let's do the same to the other strap. Now we can carefully start shifting the tank rearward and bring the rear down at an angle so we can gain access along the top of the fuel tank. Along the top of the fuel tank, you're going to find that you have a metal cover that's held in place with three 10mm headed mounting nuts. Two are on the inboard side here, and the other one's on the outboard side, closer to where that filler neck is. Last one's back here someplace. Very difficult to see. You can stick a mirror back there if you need to. Carefully remove that cover from the area. Give it a quick inspection and set it aside. With the cover out of the way, we have a clear view of our electrical connector and several fuel lines. Start with the electrical connector. On the electrical connector, you'll find that you have a red locking tab. Go ahead and carefully press that towards the outboard side here. Once you have that dislodged, you can press in on the lock here and disconnect this connector. If you have a hard time squeezing, you could use a small pocket screwdriver or pick. Make your way in between this area and lift up on that little locking tab on the inside there. A quick inspection for corrosion, of course, and then we can set this aside. Now we can start removing our fuel lines. Keep in mind there could still be fuel pressure, so just watch your eyes. On this fuel line closest to that electrical connector, you'll find that you have two green locking tabs. One in the center here closest to me, and then the other one's on the outboard side there on the opposite side. Go ahead and squeeze the two together and lift this straight up and off. Just use a flat blade screwdriver if you need to get in on whatever you can't. You can also use pliers if that works easiest for you. There we are. Careful now. Just give that a quick inspection. Make sure the O-rings are still in there, and we can set that aside for now. As for this line right here, we can leave this attached for now. We'll remove it once we get this a little closer to the ground. Let's continue on with the ones that we do need to remove. For this line, you know exactly what to do. Squeeze on those two locking ears and pull it up and out of place. Now we can start removing this larger line. For this one, you're going to squeeze on those two ears just like before, but we're going to slide it straight rearward towards the back of the tank. You can use some long nose pliers, squeeze on those two ears, and go ahead and slide it out of position. A quick inspection, set it aside. Back here, you're going to find that you have another hose making its way to the back side of the tank. Once again, we'll be squeezing on those two locking ears and sliding this out of position. A quick inspection and set that aside. Start lowering the tank down here. We're going to come down diagonally, slide it rearward so we can clear the front cross member there. Let's lower this down. The next thing we'll do is clean off the top of the tank before we continue removing anything else. Use some compressed air if necessary. Now with the fuel tank in an area that we can gain access to the top of the fuel pump assembly, we'll continue on with removing this last line across the top here. This one will have just one locking tab. Go ahead and press in on that. We'll gently lift this up and out of place. Same as always, a quick inspection on the inside there. Make sure it's in still good working order, and we'll set it aside. Now we can start removing the lock ring from the area. Before we do so, it's a good idea to mark the lock ring so you know exactly the positioning when you go to reinstall this. I'm going to mark the lock ring itself and the fuel tank. When we do have this off, of course you do want to give it a close inspection, make sure it's not rotted and weak, and then you can go ahead and set it aside. The reason why we mark this is because we do have the protective shield. We want to make sure we have it in the proper placement during the installation. To remove the lock ring, we'll be using a brass punch and a rubber mallet. Be extremely careful not to cause a spark in this area because you could have fuel vapors around any one of the ports. Let's carefully start turning this counterclockwise. This feels good. Let's go ahead and clean it up and set it aside. Now let's carefully take hold of the fuel pump assembly and lift it up and out of the fuel tank. You want to be careful because it could have fuel in it. This is going to have a level sensor here which goes out and across, so we're going to have to come up at an angle. And there it is, friend. With that out of there, continue on to carefully removing the gasket here. Try to prevent anything from falling inside the tank. We'll set that aside. The next thing you need to do is clean and inspect the fuel tank. You'll find that the tank itself is made out of plastic, but it does actually have metal locking ears making their way all the way around. Confirm that they're not rotted and weak in any way. Just wipe this out. As you remove the debris, make sure that you're wiping it out and away from the center port here. We don't want anything falling inside of the fuel tank. Once you've cleaned that, the next thing we'll do is continue on with our brand new gasket. Take that and put it in place along the fuel tank. The next thing that you'll do is continue on by installing that fuel pump. Okay, friend, let's get ready to install our brand new fuel pump assembly. Carefully take this and put it in place, making sure that we bring this and slide it down in at an angle. We'll carefully start bringing this down into place, paying attention to our gasket. We want to make sure we have that properly aligned. Continue taking this and pressing it down. You want to make sure that the gasket is properly seated. It's going to keep trying to want to work its way out of there on you. As you continue pressing this down, we'll just check all the way across. While holding it down against the tank as far as possible, continue on with your locking ring. For the locking ring, we want to make sure we have it in the proper orientation, aligning our marks when this is in the fully locked position. Double check to make sure you're seated on each and every one of these locking ears. If you're off by even one ear, you're going to have an issue where moisture might make its way into the fuel tank, or you might have fuel vapors making its way out, which is potentially very dangerous. Before we can start putting this back up in position in the vehicle, we're going to remove each one of these covers from the fuel pump assembly. You can set those aside. As you remember, on this center port here, we had that small hose. Take that, put it in position. This hose will make its way all the way along where your fuel filler hose would go. Now we can start putting the fuel tank in position. Not only do we have to pay attention to the front, but we also have our fuel fill hose, and we have that vent line there. We'll take hold of those, bend them straight up, and we'll have to bring the tank up, and then we'll put them up and over the frame. Now that we're in this position, make your way up above the fuel tank there, and we'll start reattaching each one of those fuel lines. Take them, slide them into position, listen for a click, make sure they're tight. Double check each one of the lines up along the top and continue on to your electrical connector. For that, we'll take it, slide it into place, once again listening for a click, and then lock it in with that red locking tab. Let's continue on with installing our protective cover. Go ahead and take this and put it in place over each of those 3 studs. Once you've done that, install each of those 10mm headed mounting nuts. Start them on, snug them up, make sure they're nice and tight. Right there is bottomed out. Just make sure that's nice and snug. Do the same to all. Double check to make sure that's completely secure and everything's attached up here as it should be. Once you've done so, make your way out from inside this area. Now that we're sure everything's secure up here, let's make our way to the rear of the tank. We have that one line to secure. Just press that right in. Let's get this line in place and press it into position. Got a nice click from that. We'll give it a tug. Double check, make sure it's completely secured. Let's start getting the tank in the proper position and reinstall our straps. Let's get the straps in position. We have the area that goes into the frame. We'll have to come in at an angle, pivot it around, and once we've done so, we'll put in the mounting bolt into the frame on the far side there. Let's get that rear strap in here as well. Make our way over there with our bolt. Once you have them bottomed out, torque those to 35 foot-pounds. Once you're sure those straps are holding the fuel tank up and everything's safe as can be, you can remove the support from underneath the fuel tank. Let's get the shield on here. Align it with its mounting studs that are on the bottom of those straps. Start on each of your 4 mounting nuts and snug them up. Now we can prepare to install our drive shaft. Have a look along the back side of the transmission and clean off that seal. A quick inspection. Let's continue on by sliding the drive shaft in here, and then we'll tip it up and put it in position along the differential. Let's bring this up and over the cross member. We'll slide it into position here. Just twist as needed, get it aligned and slide it in. Now we can make our way back here to the differential. Align your marking and continue on with your mounting bolts. It's a good idea to replace these. If you're not planning on it, you should at least clean the threaded area. Never use anti-seize on these. If you do use thread locker, only use yellow or blue. You don't need to use red. We'll start these in by hand. Now that they're started, bottom them out in a crisscross manner. After that, torque them to 83 foot-pounds. One last inspection while we're underneath this area, and now we can make our way to where the fuel filler neck and the fuel hoses connect on the side. Let's make sure we have our clamps on here. When installing your clamps, you want to ensure that you can see hose on both sides of the clamp. And when you squeeze the hose, you can feel that you have tube on both sides of the clamp as well. Make sure those clamps are nice and tight so you don't get a check engine light. If it feels as though you strip a clamp, replace it. Now let's make our way out from under there. Reinstall your gas cap. Close the latch and make your way under the hood. Under the hood, let's reconnect that negative battery terminal. Use your 8mm. Let's make sure this is nice and tight. Okay, friend, at this point, you're going to want to start up the vehicle. On the initial start, you may find it takes a couple extra cranks. That's due to the fact we have to get fuel pressure all the way up to the fuel rail. After the vehicle does start, you want to let it run for a little while. Make sure you have no fuel leaks and no running condition. After the vehicle's at normal operating temperature, you need to check your transmission fluid. To check your transmission fluid, make sure you're on a flat level surface with the vehicle running at normal operating temperature. Remove your transmission dipstick. Looking at the end, you can tell exactly what type of fluid to use. It says to use Mercon 5. Remove that dipstick and give it a quick wipe. After you give it a wipe, the area that you want to pay attention to is in between these two dots. If at normal operating temperature, you're down below this lower dot, continue adding until you're in the center. Once you're in the center of those dots, you can continue on by reinstalling your dipstick and then take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.